So, how are you tonight?
Good. Yeah.
Thank you for joining me so late in the day. These interview schedules have been a bit of a pickle.
No worries.
Everyone's got their own schedule that they're doing their own thing, and I appreciate you making the time for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what brings me to you is I have a website at StarTrekBookClub.com, and the fine people at Shore Leave have suggested I come by their show several times. They first started saying, "Hey, it would be great if you could come by before the pandemic," and then, of course, that happened, and it was terrible all around for everyone.
Yeah.
So this is the first year since they invited me that I'm finally able to get all the dominoes lined up to get myself up there. And they suggested I reach out and talk to all the authors beforehand because everyone likes to talk online before the shows.
Right.
Because while everyone's there, they probably prefer to be doing the business of meeting people that aren't uh, just there for pictures of videos of them. So, part of what I'm asking everyone though is, what is your history with shore leave?
Yeah, that's a good question. That would require me to have a much better memory than I do. Um, I've been coming to Shore Leave for let's see, it's got to be at least 15 years now, I think. Um, so I'm based in New York,
Hmm.
in New York City, and there's a group of us who are all in New York City, and we actually used to get together for lunch pretty regularly. Um, and so a lot of the group are actually Trek authors, and a lot of the group were already going to shore leave long before I was. So I basically heard about it from the rest of them, and got sort of introduced to the people who were the showrunners and everything else, and eventually got invited down to come and participate. It's also where Shore Leave and the sister convention Farpoint are where Crazy Eight Press, which is the author collective I'm part of with several others, got created. So
Okay.
yeah, so we actually it's one of our home cons basically, and every year we do a Crazy Eight Press panel talking about what we've done for the year, what's coming out for the next year, and things like that. So
Right now, was your first show before you were published, or with a Trek story, or was that after?
um no, would have been after, I think. My first Trek story was 2005, maybe 2006, something like that. Um, so yeah, so it's shortly after.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, that was one of the Starfleet Corps of Engineers books.
Yes.
So I think that's pretty much where you had all your publishing done. Is that series
For
with Trek?
Trek, yes.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you've published a couple other books outside of Trek.
A few.
Um, I actually saw your most recent post on Facebook saying you've got like three other books coming out this year.
Yeah.
You've got like all these projects, and then I was on your website doing just the just a surface research, and you had a post from 2018 talking about how you had three new books coming out that year from like three different publishers, and I'm like, all right, this guy's like he's staying busy at least.
Yeah. Yeah. The joke among my friends is that I really don't sleep much. And I write very fast. So I'm up
Right.
to, I think, around 54 novels at this point. Um, and before that, so I started in role-playing games. So I've got about 70 some odd role-playing game credits as well. And then I've done about a dozen children's books and about a dozen educational books, and about I think I'm up to 65 or 75 short stories at this point. So yeah.
Have you done anything with Monifus yet for the Trek campaigns?
No, I actually haven't, which is funny because I know all of them. And
Right.
we've talked a couple times. I actually wrote for the Star Trek role-playing game back when it was with Last Unicorn,
Hmm.
years ago. Um, but yeah, so far it hasn't lined up. I don't do a ton of RPG writing anymore. I really sort of shifted my focus more, which doesn't mean I wouldn't, you know, be interested in doing something with them, in part because it's Trek and in part because they're all friends. Um, but yeah, my focus is much more on fiction at this point.
Right. Yeah, the Monifist guys have had a lot of like very familiar names, just like swing by and do a quick adventure, like a standalone thing.
Yeah,
It's always great to see like, someone say, well, here's, some Star Trek adventure that because you're actually getting like the adventure settings from like someone that knows Trek pretty well.
right. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, if anybody's gonna know how to do it right, it's gonna be these guys. So
Right. So what's your next book that's coming out then?
next book that's being released is actually Cases by Candlelight, Volume 3, which is a collection of Sherlock Holmes adventures, stories. Chris Abbott, who's a good friend of mine, does Sherlock Holmes stories, really, really great ones. And a year or two back, invited me and another friend of ours, Michael Jan Friedman, to each do a story and contribute it to an anthology that he then put out. So this will be the third one. It'll actually be releasing at shore leave. So
Okay. And there's going to be a couple other authors there that are in either that one or another
yeah, so
compilation.
volume 3 is Chris, myself, Keith DeCandido, and Michael Jan Friedman, all of whom will be there.
Hmm.
And pre-orders just went up for volume 4, which is myself, Chris, Hildy Silverman, and Bob Greenberger, who will also both be there.
Right. And I think I'm talking to Mr. Greenberger this Thursday.
Okay.
Uh, so,
Actually, yeah, I just remembered actually Bob is not going to be there for once, unfortunately,
right.
in a conflict. So
Right. Yeah. And that's what I was hearing from him is that he's got, that life getting in the way as it does. But
yeah,
uh, I'm familiar with his work outside of Trek more than I am inside of Trek because he's been like everywhere.
yes.
Which you've also had a bit of a like a career, like just not doing writing or anything because you've done a lot of editing and actual like work behind the scenes.
Yeah, I for a long time, for about a dozen years, I worked at HarperCollins Children's Books doing book layout. Um, like that was my day job.
Hmm.
And since then, even though I actually switched industries as far as my day job is concerned, I still do freelance book editing, book design, book layout. So yeah, a lot of production work as well.
Right. Yeah, that's always interesting to see how the sausage is made in terms of
Yeah.
just like what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's fun. It's nice because it's a different muscle for me.
Hmm.
I'm not one of those people. I know people who can write like three different projects at once. I can only be actively writing one project at a time. I can be editing another project while I'm writing a project. I can be starting to think about a third project, but I can only be actively writing one. But I can be doing a book layout. I can be doing book covers, things like that, because those are different sort of parts of the brain. So I can, which is nice. So I can, write a chapter and then switch over and do a book cover, and then switch into a book interior, and then read over someone else's writing for them because again, editing is a different part of the brain for me. Um, so it's great because it's yeah all these different aspects. And just like you learn so much about writing from teaching, you also learn so much about writing from editing because working on other people's work, you see so much of it. And doing book layouts, you learn so much of it as well because it teaches you obviously the visuals, but also sort of a sense of like pacing almost on the page.
Hmm.
So you start to think about some of these things. Cover design, you have to think about the kind of cover image that's effective, which is really trying to figure out what encapsulates a book, which kind of relates to, pitching a book and things like that. So they're all sort of interconnected. So it's fun.
Now, what exactly is a book layout? Because like when I hear that, I hear like a word layout, which probably isn't like a Word document, right?
No, I mean typically, well, so I do mine in Adobe InDesign, which is pretty much the industry standard. Um, but it's, I mean, you can do a book layout in Word. It's just that Word really isn't built for that. I mean, Word is built for processing. It's not built for layout. So there are things that You could do it if you had to in Word, like running headers on the pages, pagination, designing the chapter titles and chapter openers, but it is 1,000 times harder to do it in Word than to do it in a program that is meant for it, like InDesign.
Okay, so it is essentially like taking the processed words and then like putting them in where they're going to go on the page then.
Exactly. Yeah, it really is. Yeah. But there's a lot to it. I mean, there's really, because you have to think about, for one thing, font. Um, you know, there are so many fonts out there that you could use. And even if you're just sticking to serif fonts, which are fonts that have the feet on them,
Hmm.
um, which you should always use for anything longer than a page of text, because otherwise you get eye strain from it. But even if you're just sticking to those, there's so many different ones, and the alterations between them can be very, very minor. You really have to compare them sometimes to see it, but some of them feel more open, some of them feel more archaic, some of them feel a little more modern. So you can actually help convey the tone and the style and the setting of a story by picking the right fonts.
Right. Yeah. Layout feels like one of those hidden things that you never notice like a good one until you notice a bad one. And you're like,
Yes,
wow, okay.
exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
that is so true. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, how long have you been doing book layouts?
So about 25 years. Yeah, about that.
Okay. Yeah, that's super exciting stuff. Um, so back to the show that we're going to. As I said, this is my first one.
Yeah.
I've been to probably a dozen different like regional shows down here in Florida. They're probably not going to be anything like the experience I'm going to be having with this one. As a first time goer, though, is there what should I know about the show?
It's going to be very interesting for all of us, honestly, because it's in a new location for the first time
Right.
ever. Um, but it's I mean, the reason that we all go back to it every year is because it's a super friendly show. Um, so many of the people there know each other and have been going for so many years. And it is fan run, so it is, very much the people who organize it do it because they love it. Um, so there's a lot of familiar faces for most people, but at the same time, it's very welcoming. So it really, like, always happy to have new people and to say, oh, great, welcome in and everything. Just obviously the industry and the genres as a whole are super welcoming, just in general. Um, you know, One of my favorite things, obviously, is the panels, the author panels, because, you know, both because they're really good topics, but also because, again, so many of the authors know each other
Hmm.
already. So it's usually a very relaxed panel atmosphere. The panelists will be joking with each other a little bit and catching up a little bit, which makes for a really good conversation because everybody's really comfortable with each other. The masquerade is great. They do such a good job of it. The musical numbers, there are a couple of groups that come out every year that are usually just a ton of fun. Um, and yeah, it's just, we just love to go and hang out. It's just really, really nice to be there.
Yeah. Now, do you ever participate in the masquerades, either as a contestant or as a judge?
No, no, I do not. Not my forte. So
Right.
I can admire the craft, but yeah, not.
Yeah, I'm the same way with cosplay, where like, man, if I had like the bravery and the know-how, I would totally be out there doing it. But I am lacking in both.
Yeah,
I'm very happy to watch them though.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, yeah, something I didn't expect to hear though is how much people are looking forward to like the musical acts
Yeah.
and just like the non-book related stuff that like attracts a lot of people to it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been going, like I said, we've been going for all this time, and our kids, have gone for years and years and years. And, I remember back when they were smaller and they used to have these, and still do, I think, it's just my kids have aged out of it, these great like science things for kids. Like they would go
Hmm.
out on the tennis courts at the old location and build soda bottle rockets and set them off, and or have telescopes set up and be showing the kids like, here's the moon and here you can make out Venus tonight and things like that. And just yeah, to have all those elements, it's just so nice.
Yeah, as you said, they're in a new location this year, which it's a shame that they're having to move after being in the same spot for as long as they were. But from what I understand, the old building is going off to the building in the sky
Yes,
because
yes.
its time has come.
I think they may have already torn it down at this point.
Right.
And much as we loved being there just because it was familiar, there were some issues with the building. It was in definite need of repair or something. So it didn't really come as a shock in that sense because, yeah, it definitely would have needed a lot of work. So it's kind of exciting. It's also a new area for us to explore. Like,
Hmm.
we used to have all of our favorite restaurants that we would go to every year. And now we have to find all new favorite restaurants, but that's fun. It's interesting to see new places. So yeah.
Yeah, my wife is actually from that neck of the woods,
Okay.
not directly Lancaster, but just north of there. And there's an ice cream place over there that she was just like absolutely agog about. She's like, you have to go get some of that ice cream while you're up there. I'm like,
Okay.
oh, okay. Well, I'm starting a checklist, right, of things I
Yes.
need
Well,
to
let us know
do.
what the ice cream place is.
Right. Um, yeah. So, have you been to that area of Pennsylvania before?
So my wife and I actually honeymooned in that area. In Adamstown, Pennsylvania,
Hmm.
which is supposed to be the antiques capital of the country. Um, so we did explore the area a little bit. I've been to like York a few times.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know it well,
Yeah.
and it's been years since I've been up there. So
Right. Yeah. Depending on how busy the construction guys are, it could be a whole new city.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's gonna be
I've planned out a itinerary of like on my way to the airport and on my way back from the airport, like hitting different bookstores and comic shops.
nice.
And the one thing I'm trying to strategize right now is like how to like pack the luggage so that I have like an extra bag to
Right.
bring stuff back with me. Because like I've tried to limit myself from buying like most of my Trek stuff now, like in person, because if you go on eBay, if you go on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, like you can buy pretty much everything, right? You
Yeah.
can get it like, and it's relatively cheap. But uh, now I'm looking more for the experiences of like going to these conventions. We just had a convention this last weekend, and a guy that I had spoken to at the show last year, he had a single copy of the X-Men Star Trek book, Planet X,
Okay.
that I bought from him. And I was like, hey, next year you should bring some Trek books. Well, he took me up on that this year, and he brought like three huge pallets of everything starting from the James Blish novelizations all the way up to stuff that was coming out like a couple years ago. So I spent way too much money on that. Luckily, he was selling them for like $5 each.
Okay.
I think I actually got I don't have it next to me, but I got a, puzzle book from the '70s that was that's the jewel of my collection right now. Like next week there'll be something else in that spot, but
Right.
the yeah, the actual big thing that I bought during that show was a copy of Care Bears, a comic book that Marvel, when they were doing their 25th anniversary, they had frames, like a border around each of their comics for
Right.
like that month, and it was like all the superheroes, and they did it throughout all their main series. They did it for Iron Man, Spider-Man, like just all the big series. Which everyone bought the mainline ones, but no one ever bought the Care Bears, the Muppet Babies, the Heathcliff, like those ones. So now those are the super rare ones that
Of
like,
course.
it's still in my wheelhouse for like, buying comics from that time period, but still I was like, do I really want to spend $50 on this book? Because it's it's kind of on my wish list, but like also um just weird to be spending that much money on a book that like I'm only trying to get to complete that collection.
Right.
Which from what I understand, Shore Leave isn't necessarily a sales show. It's mostly a program and entertainment show, right?
Yeah, I mean there is a dealer's room.
Hmm.
And there are certain dealers who are there every year. Again, like, people who keep coming back over and over, which is great. Including at least one publisher, because eSpec Books is there every year. Um,
Hmm.
and I've published books with them. Keith Canada's published books with them. A bunch of other people that we know and are friends with have published books with them. So they have a good selection. Um, but the dealer's room is not, huge. it's one feature. It's not like necessarily the central feature.
Right.
I think that people, like one of the things that we do at Shore Leave, which I think people do come out for a lot, is the Meet the Pros party, which is
Mm.
Friday night, where basically they have all of the authors out there to sign books. So,
Right.
and a lot of us have books to sell, things like that. So you can buy direct from the author and have them sign it for you on the spot and things like that. But, people are getting older books signed, books that they already had signed, programs signed, whatever. So, and that's a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah, I'm always torn between, do I bring my old stuff to have that signed, um, or do I, buy something new there?
Yeah,
And the couple of shows that I've gone to, like I don't like the idea of taking my things to these shows only because like it's an opportunity to lose it or get it damaged. And if you buy a brand new one, you're supporting the author, right? So
right.
get them to sign it right then and there. Um, like what kind of books? I'm assuming you're going to be bringing some of your own, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what kind of books are you going to have on your table?
So I usually bring, it's tough because I run out of space at this point, so I have to be a little more selective. But I usually bring at least the first books of my Duck Bob science fiction comedy series, No Small Bills, the first book of my Relic Chronicles epic fantasy series, which is called Bones of Empire, um, the first book of, well, so far the only book of my urban fantasy cozy series, Yeti Left Home. That's one from eSpec, so they'll actually have that book throughout the show. Um, Bob Greenberger and another friend of ours, Paul Kupperberg, and I did a trilogy of stories called Rideus, which is about all the gods coming back. So since Bob won't be there to bring it, I will probably bring it. Um, so yeah, it'll be an assortment. I try to, because some of us go to the show every year, and so we know a lot of people. It's actually really nice to have people come up to your table and say, oh, hey, it's great to see you. So what do you have new this year? You know,
Right.
because they know a lot of our books already. So I'll definitely bringing like Cannon Bell, which is my Regency romance that I released a few months ago. That's something that nobody there has seen yet, so I'll make sure to have that with me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw you posted something on Facebook about something called the BEO files, and I did a quick Google on that. And I wasn't able to figure out what BEO actually stands for.
Yeah, so it stands for the Bureau of Eldrich Oversight. That's a series that just got announced. I'm going to be doing that with Chris Kennedy Publishing. Um,
Mhm.
and it's basically it's an urban fantasy, modern day, except that magic is not only real, it is known and it is government regulated. So the BEO is actually the government agency that
Okay.
oversees all magic. And my main character is a mage who has been stationed by the BEO in Greenville, North Carolina, and is furious about it.
Yeah, a lot of Eldritch horrors coming out in North Carolina in this series.
Well, that's why he's furious about it. He is up in arms because he's like, here I am, this young, talented mage, and you stick me in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina. And not even in the research triangle, like he's below the research triangle.
Mm,
So, he is livid about it. And then of course, things happen and it turns out that he is well
right.
placed. So,
Yeah, obviously, it's not a book series about nothing happening, right?
right. Exactly.
So how many publishers are you actually publishing through right now? Because I think that's like three or four you've mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I publish, so I'm a hybrid author. So I've worked with, major presses, small presses, self-pub, author collective. Right now, I'm working with, let's see, Crossroad Press, Falstaff Books, eSpec Books, Chris Kennedy Publishing, obviously my own stuff with Crazy Eight Press, and then also Catalyst Game Labs, which does Shadowrun fiction. Um, those are off the top of my head. I'm probably missing at least one, maybe more. So
I mean, it's a positive problem to have so many business partners that you're forgetting one or two there.
yeah,
Now, do you do any work with the International Association of Media Tie-in Authors?
yeah. Actually, that's a story that I have to write. No, I already wrote that story. That story's already in and edited. Um, for an upcoming anthology with them, Multiverse of Mystery, which is all
Ah,
Sherlock Holmes variants.
right.
So
Yeah, I've heard a couple other authors talk about that one. It seems like there's a fair bit of excitement about the both the group putting out its own anthologies and
yeah,
like the direction that they're going in.
yeah, it's a great group. I've been part of it pretty much since it started, and it's really nice because before them, we didn't have any sort of industry organization like that for
Hmm.
tie-in specifically. There's obviously things like SIFWA and HWA and so on, but there wasn't one for tie-ins. So the IAMTW really sort of fills that gap, which is awesome. Just to be able to like all know each other and all chat with each other and say, oh, what are you working on now, and what are you working on now, and it's really nice for that. But yeah, a few years back we started realizing that we have all this talent at our disposal. We should do stuff ourselves. So we put out a book a year or two back called what was it called, Tying the Tide. I think it's the right title for it, which is all public domain um, tie-in characters. And so that was a lot of fun. I did a Sinbad story for that one. And then, yeah, this year we actually have, I think, 2 to 3 different anthologies going on. And there's so much talent in the group that it was a matter of sort of saying, okay, who's interested in working on this idea? Who's interested in working on this one? Who's interested in working on this one? And just so many hands went up for each of them. So, which is great. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You guys have been able to come together and put your heads together.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's I'm sure there's a political side to the group as well, or is it mostly just creative?
No, it's really just creative,
Okay,
which is really, really nice and really supportive, which is great.
right.
It's the industry in general, just over the years, has just been so supportive. I mean, obviously there are always exceptions, but in general, most established writers in speculative fiction are eager to support new writers, to
Hmm.
help them, to guide them, because we all remember what it was like to get that guidance. And so, when we meet someone new, our response is typically, "Welcome to the group. It's awesome to have you here. Let's see what we can do to help you."
Right.
And the IEMTW is exactly like that. Like so many people in it are so supportive for everybody else. So yeah, it's just really positive. And yeah, we don't like politics doesn't come into it. It really is just about the stories and
Yeah,
projects.
I was primarily thinking of the kerfluffle with maybe I'm not remembering correctly, but I think it was Alan Dean Foster wasn't getting residuals anymore for some like alien
Yes.
stuff that he
So
did
yeah,
after.
yeah, there is right. There is, I mean, obviously, one of the concerns, as especially as tie-in writers, who are, more so, I would say, than a lot of writers, we write for other people. I mean, obviously,
Mhm.
we write, for intellectual properties. So we are working for someone. Um, so yes, I mean, obviously, you know, the rights are always a concern, the contracts are always a concern, the residuals are concerns, things like that. Um, and it is again very supportive in that sense. So yeah, when that came up, and there have been a couple of other things that come up, but people are very quick to sort of mention it to everybody else and say, hey, here's what's going on, here's what you need to know, here's all the information, um, just to keep everybody aware, um, just so
And
everybody's
properly informed too.
properly informed, yes, which is really important because yeah, you hear things, but until someone says, okay, here's the definitive information directly from this person, here is the actual contract that's being referred to, here's the language, that sort of thing, it's very hard to tell how much of it is accurate, how much of it is, game of telephone, whatever it is. So yeah.
Right. Now you mentioned working in other people's we're working with other people's properties.
Yeah.
Is Trek the only IP that you've worked with that is like that, or what
Oh
other
no.
franchises have you
No.
worked on?
No, I mean like I said, I started in RPGs. So obviously I was doing a lot of tie-in work there. And just
Mhm.
in terms of fiction though, I mean my first full-length novels were Warhammer novels. Um, And then, I did two for World of Warcraft, written for Starcraft, Stargate Atlantis, um, Eureka, Mutants and Masterminds, Shadowrun, and then short stories for um, X-Files, Deadlands, um, Universalis, yeah, probably at least six others that I'm not thinking of off the
Right.
top of my head.
And were those
Um,
short stories for anthologies, or were those in magazines or
Most
other?
of them for anthologies. A couple of them, like I've done a couple for Pinnacle Entertainment Group, like Deadlands, and a couple of their other properties, which have been for their magazines that they put out.
Mhm.
Um, and early on, I mean, sort of how I made my transition from RPGs to tie-in fiction was doing short stories for games, both for anthologies and also to actually be used in games themselves. So as short pieces of fiction, sort of interspersed in chapters and things. So
Right. Video games are a whole other level of narrative control.
yes, yes, and those are, I've written for, I've done novelizations for video games, and yeah, it's really interesting to do. Um, Fortunately, I've had very good experiences with it. So,
Right. Do you have any Trek content that you're looking to have be released, or looking to dip your toe back into that franchise, or is that something that's firmly in the rearview mirror right now?
yeah, I mean, I've been out of Trek for a while, which isn't to say that I wouldn't happily dip my toe back into it.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I mean, I especially loved doing the SCE stuff because, you know, the SCE was that sort of perfect mixture of you have all this established, universe and all these established races and characters and even situations, but at the same time, you also have the freedom to sort of play a little bit, to have a little wiggle room to move around and tell your own stories, create your own races, your own incidents, your own characters. So it was such a good mix of things, and such a good mix of authors. Just everybody in it was so great, and again, we all got to know each other, and Keith DeCandido, who was editing it all, used to send out a Bible to everybody to keep us all updated on here's
Hmm.
what happened lately with these characters. So we all knew what everybody else was writing, and we could all work together to sort of be like, oh, that's great. Let me, play off that for my piece. And oh, you're doing something two books after me. Let me set up something for you to help lead into that. It's yeah, it's hard to find such a good experience. So, if I got back into Trek, it'd be interesting. Again, I mean, it's Trek, so I mean, obviously, I would love to, um, but to be able to match that level of, um, you know, cooperation, and enthusiasm across the board with everybody involved, I don't know. We'll see. I'm not saying no.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like Simon and Schuster's somewhat missed the mark on like the timing of like when that series ended versus like when like the Kindle really took off, and like it we currently have a renaissance of like the Substack, Patreon, like those types of things that I think would fit into something like the SCE was doing, where it's shorter books. You
Yeah,
pay a certain amount every month, and you get a story. It As a Trek fan myself, I would love to have that kind of opportunity.
right.
Unfortunately, Simon and Schuster is probably a little more busy trying to figure out their own future than setting up new series like that. But it'd be nice if we could just like manifest that, like put it out into the universe. Enough people hear it, and it'll. We don't even need credit for it. We just say that however it happens, it'll happen.
Right. There we go. I'll support that.
Yeah. So, do you have a Patreon?
I don't actually.
Is
Um,
that something you've ever considered, or a Substack, or anything that like fans can directly?
I considered it. My concern with it was always, I mean, obviously the big concern for anyone doing a Patreon is, first of all, having the audience for it. Um,
Mhm.
but my concern was really that obviously if I was going to do something like that, I would want to make sure that I could actually maintain the amount of content as well as the level of content. Because the last thing I would want to do is set something up like that, go out there and reach out to everybody and try to get people involved and get people to subscribe, and then, miss a week or a month or whatever it is because I got caught up with something else and something else came up, and there was a, deadline and then other edits came in and whatever it was. Um, and I just, you know, I think about it occasionally. I have a lot of friends who do it, and I think it's great. It's one of so many ways now to have direct contact with fans and to be able to produce directly to fans. And I
Hmm.
think it's awesome. I just, I don't know that I could carve out the right amount of time to be able to guarantee that I could produce that.
Yeah. I will say that most of the people that I am a patron of, they're in that same like, I'm 6 months behind on this stuff, guys, but like I'll get it to you eventually. And I don't think anyone expects like a single author who's running everything himself to have the deadlines, especially when you have like the things that are actually paying the bills. Like maybe Stephen King or someone like his size like would be able to like run a
Right.
Patreon with, and that just be like his main source of income. But like you need the larger income streams that Patreon just doesn't do uh, very well, not yet at least.
Yeah, I mean, I might revisit it. One of the things that sort of occurred to me is that, I do a lot of short stories for anthologies,
Hmm.
and some of them are for a very specific time period for limited release runs, and it's very difficult to sell reprints because a lot of magazines won't take them. They
Right.
only want, brand new stories that have never been published anywhere. So if you've published something, even if it is a limited run for a very specific time, um, there's much, much, much fewer opportunities for it. And what that means is that I actually have a stack of stories that have been published but have only been seen by a small group of people. Um, but I would have a hard time selling them.
Right.
But for something like a Patreon, that might be an option. I might be able to offer those, and then that would give me a sort of backlog to be able to work through while I'm writing new things. And or to sort of plug in like in gaps and say, oh, okay, I didn't get a chance to write a brand new piece for you this week or month or whatever it is, but here's one that no one's seen before. So yeah, I think about it.
Yeah. Now, the content you're referring there, is that stuff that like you've written for someone else, but like the rights have like reverted back to you, or was it always yours content?
No, these are all mine. A lot of them have to do so. There's a convention called Origins Game Fair, which takes
Hmm.
place in Columbus, Ohio, in June every year. I just came back from that a couple weeks ago. Um, and one of the things we do there is for the Authors Alcove, which is all of our writers. Everyone involved contributes a short story for an anthology, which is only available at the show.
Okay.
We have an autograph page in the front, so you can pick up the anthology, read a little bit of all these authors, some of whom you know, some of whom you don't know, and get everybody to sign it. And I've been doing Origins for I figured out what it was the other day and I forgot now, but I think it's again about 15 years probably. Um, so I have something like 15 short stories probably. Um,
Right.
and each one has appeared in that year's anthology, which at most had 500 copies available, um, and has never appeared since anywhere else. So I potentially have this whole, and each anthology is themed based on the show theme for the year. So it'll be something like Legends or Dragons or Origins or Legacies or Artists or things like that. Um, so yeah, so I actually have like a sort of stack of them, and they're all original. They're all mine. There's no concerns with any IP or anything like that. I own them. Uh, but part of the deal was, I could not sell them anywhere else for a year. Um, those have long since passed,
Right.
but still, yeah, hard to sell previously published stuff. So
Yeah. So of the social medias that you have, because I think you've got like all the big ones right now.
yeah,
Which one are you finding is the best for fan outreach or even fan response?
I'm terrible about social media. I'm really bad about it. I mean, I still honestly I get a lot of response on Instagram these days, I would have to say.
Hmm.
When I'm good about actually putting things up on Instagram. Um, and I think in part that's because when I put up stuff on Instagram, it tends to be like when I'm traveling and I'll put up pictures of places I've been and stuff like that, rather than just like book covers and things.
Right.
But if I do a show, I do put up a picture of, here's my booth, here's the latest book, things like that. Um, Facebook, I mean, I have two different Facebook accounts, obviously, like a lot of people do. I have, the author page versus my personal one. The personal one I post on every single day. And I do get a lot of, I do always post like, here's the chapter I wrote this night, or here's the book that's just come out and things like that. And I do get a lot of response on that. So that's the one where I'm certainly the most active. But
Hmm.
obviously that's also a lot of friends, many of whom I like that seem to be fans, like to think that they're fans. They certainly are very supportive, which is fantastic. But there's not the separation in the same way. And I'm not as good about posting on my author page, which is strictly as an author. Um, Blue Sky is fascinating because it's much more conversational.
Hmm.
It's just obviously much smaller, much newer. But it seems to be a very friendly place and a very nice place. Um, so I don't know how much traction I get there, but it's certainly nice to occasionally post on there and get replies from people and have conversations with them.
Yeah, Blue Sky has the very distinct feeling that Twitter had when it was first getting off the ground.
Yes.
That like you're a whole bunch of people being like, follow Friday. Here's like the 10 new people that have joined,
Right.
that you might be interested in. How long have you been on Blue Sky?
Oh, that's a good question. You asked me questions about dates and things which I can't answer. Um,
Just general ranges are fine.
when did Blue Sky start? Is it
That I honestly have no idea.
in a year or so, I think, probably,
Yeah.
right? So probably I got on it reasonably early.
Okay.
Uh, so probably, yeah, around that.
Were you able to get a general public invite, or were you
No, I actually got invited by somebody before it went public.
yeah.
Yeah, so if that helps with timing. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I got into Gmail, is that I knew someone that knew someone that had a code, and I got in
okay,
before the general public did. And I've had the same email account now for 20 years,
right.
or however long Gmail's been around, which you turn around and 20 years have gone past. And I was telling my wife the other day, the 80s were only 20 years ago, and it's going to stay that way until the day I die.
Right. Well, good luck with that one.
Yeah, exactly. So I've kept you now for about 45 minutes. You want to keep talking, or you want to
Sure.
call it
Yeah.
there? Okay. I just don't want to take up your entire night.
No, it's fine.
Are you East Coast or Eastern
East
time?
Coast. Yeah, New York.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're in New York. You mentioned that, right? How long have you lived in New York?
Uh, 20, no, 30 years. Yeah, about 30 years. Almost
Oh,
30
since
years.
the 80s.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, yeah, I've lived in the same place now for about 15 years, and there was a time period where I was moving around like every other year. It seemed like it really wasn't. It was like every 2 or 3 years. But
Right.
after you settle down for more than like 5 years, you're like, maybe this is home now. Maybe this is it.
Yeah. Well, my parents were both from New York.
Hmm.
So, even though I didn't grow up in New York, I used to come up to New York pretty regularly to visit like grandparents and aunts and uncles and things. Um, but yeah, my wife and I moved back here. I guess it actually, so we moved in 98, I believe. So 26 years. Yeah. So
It's a good time to make a home.
yeah, yeah. And my kids have never known a house other than this one. So, which my wife and I both moved around a lot when we were young. So that's kind of a different thing, but it's nice. It's nice to have
Right.
one place that is that home. So
Yeah, that's stability.
yeah.
Um, So the Shore Leave Convention,
Mhm.
it's 3 days. It's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Um, like you said, you've been in the general area, but you haven't been to this hotel before.
Nope.
Uh, have the Shore Leave people done any kind of like prep work with any of the guests yet on telling you what to expect?
Not with us, but I do know that they have the organizers have been there several times to check over
Hmm.
space. First when they were scouting, then when they decided to actually, sign with them, and then since then to, prep and make sure that everything was going to be where it needs to be. So yeah, we don't really know too much yet in terms of like, where we'll be or where the panel rooms are, but they have definitely sussed this stuff out. So.
Right. Yeah, I haven't checked their site in a couple days. Have they released the program yet for
That's a good.
what they're going to be doing with everyone?
Yeah, I was
'Cause I
just
know
site, so
from my conversations with other authors, there's a bit of a competition for panels and which ones you're going to be able to get on, which ones you're not.
yeah, a little bit. Which again is sort of, a fun rivalry. It's a nice problem to have.
Right.
Um, because sometimes you go to conventions and you're not quite sure what panels you're going to be on till you get there and things. Shore Leave is very good about, here, tell us the panels that you're interested in, making sure that the authors, actually recommend panels that they want to do. So panels that they're interested in from the start. But also panels that you think would be cool even if you weren't on them, even if it's not your thing necessarily, maybe it's a panel you want to attend. And then yeah, people kind of going like, ooh, I really want to be on this one. I really want to be on this one. But you can only fit so many people on each panel. So yeah, it does kind of get to a point where you're like, oh yeah, well, okay, but I got these three panels I really want. I didn't get these other two I also would have liked, but I did get these other two that I did, and it all comes together pretty well. So
Yeah. It's coming up quick. I was just looking at my calendar, and
yeah,
well, we got about 2 weeks until we're going to be up there.
yeah, yeah. It's gonna fly by. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember making the original plans for this, and it was like 3 months away, and I was like, I got plenty of time to do all this stuff. And now I'm like, I'm gonna have to start editing videos. I'm gonna have to start posting about stuff. Um, well, I think I've like run out of things to ask you about. Is there anything that you wanted to bring up or mention before I let you go?
No, no, just definitely anybody who's coming to shore leave, definitely come by. Crazy Eight Press always has a table. They actually give us a table, which is really nice of them. I don't know where it's going to be this year since
Hmm.
we don't know what the layout is, but they're always very good to us. So we'll have all our books there. We always have a Crazy Eight panel. But yeah, it's such a great con because especially, like the authors you can always find us wandering around the halls and stuff, so it's so easy to just stop somebody and say like, hey, just want to ask you about this book or about this panel or this thing you said on this panel or, get you to sign something or whatever it is. Um, you know, yeah, we're all there.
All right. Well, I'll be easy to spot. I'm 6.5 feet tall, so I'll probably be wearing a bright red shirt again.
Okay.
Just for the Star Trek tie-in, right? Not
All
that I have
right.
a death wish for myself, but
Right.
it's the red polo. All right. Well, I will give you the rest of the night back, and I will
Okay.
see you in just a couple weeks.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
All right. Have a good evening.
Yeah, you too.